I don't know about you, but I find people who like to talk about themselves incredibly dull. That being said, enough people have asked me to talk about my personal experience with anti-xeno combat and Elite Dangerous more broadly, but they've convinced me to indulge in some of the dullness of talking about oneself. So if will indulge me, hopefully you'll find that there's a story here that potentially might be interesting, or potentially it is not. You be the judge. And the way we'll talk about the story is through a series of questions that I have received, people have asked me to comment on and talk about. The first one being how I discovered Elite Dangerous. Well, the Frontier Elite 2 game was my first game on the PC, on the 486 DX33 megahertz. At the time, PC speeds was measured in megahertz and in 2-digit increments. And it's actually kind of funny because I was very young and I didn't know how MS-DOS really worked. So I didn't know what the command to change directories was. So the only way I managed to get actually into the game directory was by inserting a CD and reinstalling the game. And once the installation was done, I would find myself into a Frontier directory and I could actually launch the game. So I must have installed the game like 50 times before I finally figured out the change directory command in MS-DOS. But nevertheless, I've been playing the game since then, and I was a big fan of the Elite 2 game, and I was a big fan of Frontier First Encounters, especially of the custom storyline that was embedded in that game, where you actually get to meet the Thargoids, by the way. Or sort of meet the Thargoids, can actually get to see them, but you get to talk to them. If you haven't played it, maybe it's time to go back and try it. It also has a famous Panther Clipper that people are kind of raving about right now and hoping it makes it into Elite Dangerous. If you want to fight, you can. You just go back to that game. So anyway, that was how it all started, really. And having been a fan of your second and a half games, I picked up on the Kickstarter when the Kickstarter was announced, and I was immediately involved and decided to join the Kickstarter. I joined as a beta backer. To this day, I regret not having been an alpha backer, as my rebuy would have been even lower, and I saved so much more money on rebuys, and I had plenty of rebuys, as we'll get to in a moment. And so I joined the Kickstarter of Elite Dangerous as a beta backer, and I've been playing on and off. I've been playing quite a bit on launch, and I've played through the early days of Horizon. I was slightly late in adopting Horizons, but I was with the game really since, and through the overall Odyssey experience. So that, I guess, answers the first question on how I discovered Elite Dangerous. What drew me into AX combat, and what was my initial experience? So what drew me into anti-xeno combat really are the YouTube videos of Commanders Maligno, who decided to take on a Thargoid Medusa in a Sidewinder. And when I saw that, my head just exploded. I was like, this is unbelievable. How can anyone do something like this? And I saw how he flew the ship, and I saw how he juggled like his pips and right panel repairs, and it was unbelievable what he managed to do, and while sort of still kind of actively engaging in combat against something that was at the time incredibly tough and harder than what I knew I was even remotely close to being able to do. And so that fascinated me, and I said, this looks really hard, but it also looks really interesting. So why don't I give it a shot? And my initial experience, I think, was the same experience of most people, which is I went to the Anti-Xeno Initiative website, I read a few guides, I built a Chieftain. Funny story, I actually built a shielded Chieftain at first, because that was the originally recommended build for newcomers. That is no longer the case, but it was at the time. And then I proceeded to get my rear end handed to me multiple times with my canopy smashed and myself running away with my tail between my legs away from a lowly Cyclops, because I had no freaking idea what the hell I was doing or how I was supposed to do it. Which I think is the initial experience of most people. But I took it in stride and as a challenge, and I kept at it, and the rest followed. What were the biggest challenges at the beginning? Well, setting up your controls, surprisingly, is something that you don't really think that much about, and it kind of doesn't matter that much in most of the game because the game is kind of so easy. If you take out anti-xeno combat and PvP, and maybe a handful of other things, I mean, everything goes in Elite. The game is incredibly forgiving, incredibly easy. But anti-xeno combat is not. PvP is not. Like some of these other activities are not. So setting up your controls was tricky. Learning how to fly with flight assist disabled took a while. Learning to stagger my fire and alternate fire was tricky and not something I had done before. Learning how to aim fixed weapons precisely enough to be able to snipe a Thargoid heart took a level of precision that handily I wasn't used to. So building that precision handling and the muscle memory that goes hand in hand with that was probably sort of some of the earliest challenges. And more broadly, the sort of learning curve associated with understanding what to expect of the challenge that I was facing. I didn't understand how Thargoids really behaved. I didn't really appreciate what worked and what didn't in those circumstances. I was deeply ignorant, like generally most people who start out in anti-xeno combat. And so the lack of learning, the lack of muscle memory, and the poor control setup I had at the beginning, and the general learning curve associated with learning to fly FA off, while also learning to be very precise in your movements and your aim, were probably some of the biggest challenges that I faced at the beginning. How many years have you been fighting the Thargoids? So the answer is a lot. And I actually went back and looked at my timeline of ranks of when I actually took down different kinds of interceptors, and I pulled it up here for reference. My first Cyclops was in January 27, 2020, so 5 years and change ago. And I proceeded to go through the ranks to a point where I took down my first Hydra about a month later in February of that year. And then proceeded to do a number of challenge ranks thereafter and achieve what was one of our higher ranks at the time, which was Ace in March. So about 3 months later. But there was still a lot of room to grow. And some of the things that I'm kind of more known for, I've gone to much, much later. In fact, Sidewinder versus Hydra, which is probably one of the things I'm better known for, didn't happen until January of 2022. So 2 years into anti-xeno combat. And that's, I think, when I started doing somewhat harder things in anti-xeno combat. What was your path to be, what is the question again? What was your path to becoming one of the most recognized AXI commanders? Again, the beginning was unremarkably normal, right? I started like anybody would start by finding the AXI and reading their guides and learning like anybody else did by getting my teeth kicked in my Thargoids multiple times over and over again. But I was lucky to have some incredible teachers and outstanding mentors. I really could not have asked for better ones. Folks like Maligno himself, folks like Commanders Ariana Somrage, folks like Commander Engram, really all the staff and all the mentors of the Anti-Xeno Initiative held me hand in hand, guided me hand in hand, taught me everything I really knew at the time, and helped me and encouraged me no matter what. And kind of every now and then they kind of also, put me in my place because I needed some putting in my place every now and then. So that was good too. That was also part of a learning journey. In this journey, I built in relationships. I made some friends. I became close with the community of Anti-Xeno Initiative commanders. And eventually I was asked to join the staff team, which I was delighted to do, and eventually grew through the ranks and experience of the Anti-Xeno Initiative staff, which was a fantastic experience, and I think a great way to also contribute to the development and guidance of that community. As part of that, I helped organize and develop a series of additional challenge ranks, which eventually converged into what is now known as decent pilot, which is sort of a meta rank over challenge ranks, and what we jokingly call the end of the AXI tutorial when it comes to anti-xeno combat, noting that it's obviously more than just a tutorial. It's actually very freaking hard to accomplish that, and an achievement in its own right. But it is something that I helped kind of steer and design. I also helped arrange a number of things that I won't bore you about here, but I had a chance to contribute as part of the anti-xeno initiative staff for quite a while. As part of that, I also had the privilege of flying with community managers of frontier development and engage with sort of the developers of the game in being one of the many voices that represented the community in helping steer where the game was going. At some point, I realized that there was one thing that the AXI didn't do, which was providing a smaller community of commanders that were focused on one particular thing that was of interest to me personally, and that was organized wing-based anti-xeno combat. As much of a training, much of the curriculum, if you want, of the anti-xeno initiative is really centered and organized around the solo experiences and you learning to be a good standalone commander and fight on your own terms as well as you can as a single unit. I wanted something more than that, and I wanted to develop the curriculum or the doctrine, if you want, of people fighting together as a unit and getting together in an organized fashion. And I knew that wasn't for everyone. Because a lot of people want just to come and join and goof around in the game, and that's totally fine. But there's a few folks who actually enjoy the challenge of fighting as a disciplined unit and the amazing results that you can achieve once you get that right. And so that, combined with the fact that I also felt that the AXI was a humongous place and it was hard to manage a more tight-knit community when you have 30,000 people in a server, made me decide to create and launch the Xenostrike Force. That was, again, meant to create a smaller community of folks that were more, quote, serious and dedicated, specifically to flying together and learning to fly together as a unit and accomplish what they can together, which I believe is well above and beyond what people can achieve as a standalone commander on their own. And that was a blast. I think as part of that process, I started making guides, first on the wiki, then on the website. And then I started making a few YouTube videos of the things I did and of videos that I felt were helpful to others. Some of the early ones that are still relevant today include the Anti-Xeno Academy, which I produced, which saw also the contribution of many, many other commanders from the Anti-Xeno Initiative, which was a great collaboration and to this day might be one of the most meaningful Anti-Xeno training videos there are out there. And then a number of others that pertains to kind of more technical aspects on how to set their controls or how to get into intermediate or advanced cold orbiting, or a number of things like what are mantras and how they work, like things that questions that were coming up again and again in the Anti-Xeno Initiative Discord. I kind of thought to myself, well, I've answered this question 766 times. You know what? I'm just going to make a 2-minute video for this thing. And next time someone asks, I just point it to the video. And you know what? The video explains it better than I can explain it, responding in Discord just with text back and forth. And that was my initial angle and approach to content creation in the community of elite daters. Some of that gained steam and recognition, and that started, creating more of a following online to what I was doing. And in turn, I also invested in learning and becoming better at video production and all the technical aspects that have to do with content creation. So I figured out how to use OBS Studio. I ditched some of the early tools that I was using, and I got my hand on DaVinci Resolve and taught myself how to use that, and got a handle on like how scripts for videos worked and thumbnails and all the things that kind of don't need to think about, but as a viewer, but as a creator actually matter a lot. And so there was a lot of personal growth in getting there. Since I've got a handle on like more of a content creation side of things, I've also started to mix the content I created between guides that explain how things work or they don't work, like in the case of the most recent Stutterbug video, with community-related events and things which organize people around some kind of common intent or goal. Like, for example, the videos that I put out during the Battle of Seoul, where I explained how Titan bombing works and help people get into an activity that they might not even have ever contemplated in the least painful way possible. And for instance, the blockade of HIP 22460 that followed, which was an attempt of giving the community something AX related to do after the Titans were gone, which I was not expecting for front developments to pick up on and make a big event in game and a thing out of it, but they did, and that was an interesting experience. And I guess that's how I would answer. That's probably the longest answer I guess, or that's probably the answer I gave. But it's also a kind of question that I would put back to you guys. What do you guys think is the answer to this question? But I think your answer on this one is going to be better than mine. It's certainly shorter, so I have to make it longer. By the way, if you want even a longer answer, I've done Ask Me Anything on Reddit a while back. I'm going to link in the video comments below in case you're interested to see like some of the questions that came in live from the community. And then finally, what is it like to lead the XSTF, Extreme Strike Force, and witness the impact of your work within the AX community? Well, I mean, there are slightly different things. I mean, the short answer is it's awesome. I really love it, and it's really one of the great sources of joy in my life. First and foremost, I want to say the Xeno Strike Force kind of tends to lead itself and run itself. I mean, there are people like Alex MG1 and Mediocre and Xarian, and like there's a range of people who are just amazing. And they probably do more to lead the Xeno Strike Force than I do, very candidly. And it shows. And in the people in there also don't really take a lot to lead, in that they are amazing and just wonder to fly with. And every time I just suit up and get into an op order, which is the name we give to our own events, I always have a blast. And I can't remember like a single instance where things were as smooth as butter in every single thing we did, and some of them are actually pretty freaking hard. So it was kind of remarkable, just how easy of a group it is to be with and get along with. So yeah, no, it's been an amazing experience, and where I've made even deeper friends, and which I'm deeply thankful for, because candidly, it's a lot of fun and a great experience. And witnessing the impact of my work within the AX community, well, I really appreciate being able to help people. And every time I see someone, either in the YouTube comments or in the in-game chat, as has happened a few times, appreciate and mention that what the work I've done has made their experience in the game better, or their appreciation of the game higher, or otherwise has made them able to enjoy this universe and this alternate reality in a way that they may not have been able to do otherwise. Like, for instance, there was this example where somebody mentioned fighting with their son during the Battle of Saul, and appreciating the fact that the tutorial we put out helped them do Titan bombing together as a family. And I don't know, it's one of those things that, like, I feel just brings me a lot of happiness. I guess that's the way to say it. And I mean, not all of it is like bright and warm and fuzzy. I'm sure some of the things I've done are controversial. Some of the builds I made are controversial, and I've gotten a lot of flack for it. And some of it is justified. Maybe all of it is justified. All of it is legitimate. Some of it is justified. Let's put it that way. And I also made mistakes, as some of my recent videos have explained, and I try to be forthcoming and upfront when I do, and correct them to the extent I can. But overall, I like to hope that the net is positive, and that the impact I've had on the game is one that has made the community better than it would have been had I not done what I did, and had I not put out the content I have, and had I not helped build the communities and participate in the communities that I have. But the ultimate judge of all of that is you. As at the end of the day, you as community members, you as viewers of my channel and content are the ones who need to be judge, and in some cases jury and executioner, if you will, hopefully not too often, of what you feel that impact has been, and what you feel the direction and feedback also that you have for me should look like. So that's my story. That's my journey. Probably a little too long, but as Pascal said, was it Pascal? I think it might be Pascal. If I had more time, I would have made it shorter, but it is heartfelt and candid to the best of my ability to be candid, which hopefully is not too shamefully awful. Have to always close as always with a glory to mankind. Come on, Mechan. Over and out. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being viewers and members of this wonderful, amazing community.